The person who never posts on social media is not shy. They're not antisocial. They're not hiding something. They're not depressed. Those are the stories we tell ourselves to feel better about the fact that we can't stop. Because here's what the psychology of silence actually shows. They don't avoid social media because something is wrong with them. They avoid it because something is right with them. And that distinction, that small, brutal distinction, is what's going to be impossible to ignore. By the end of this, you're not going to see quiet people differently. You're going to see yourself differently. And that's the part that's going to hurt. Think about that someone, just one person that you actually know or knew who just doesn't post on social media, or pretty much anywhere for that matter. Maybe they never did, or maybe they disappeared one day and never came back. What did you think about them? Honestly, when I first started looking into this, my assumption was the same as yours. I thought the absence was a signal of something missing, some fear, some insecurity, some inability to connect, like maybe something was broken deep inside. And then I started reading the actual research. What I found was the exact opposite of what I expected. The absence isn't a deficit. In many cases, it's a choice that requires more psychological strength than posting ever does. But we default to assuming something is wrong with the quiet person instead of asking whether something is wrong with the noise. And that says everything about where we are right now as a culture. There's a concept in psychology called impression management. It's the idea that we're constantly managing how other people perceive us. Every word, every photo, every story. We're not just living anymore, we're performing. Social media didn't create that impulse. It gave it an infinite stage and a real-time score. The people who never post stepped off that stage, and instead of asking what that cost them, we have to ask what it actually gave them. Because the answer is not what most people expect. But before we get into what this silence actually means, there's a lie we need to talk about. A lie about why we post that you've probably repeated to yourself 1,000 times. Why people seek validation on social media. Let's be honest. Every photo you've ever posted, every caption you've ever written, it wasn't really about the memory. It wasn't about staying connected either. That's just the story we tell ourselves. The research tells a different story. A study in the journal Computers and Human Behavior found that our primary motivator is impression management. It sounds technical, but it's actually very simple. Every time you post, a part of your brain is calculating, who is going to see this? What will they think? Does this confirm the version of yourself you want them to believe in? And here's the part that's hard to sit with. That calculation happens automatically, even when you genuinely believe you're just sharing a moment. The need to be perceived is so deeply wired into us that it runs underneath everything, like background software you never agreed to install. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And seeing it clearly is the only way to actually understand what the person who never posts is doing differently. They opted out of that calculation entirely. Not by accident, not because they forgot to download the app. They looked at the system, understood what it was asking of them, and said no. And that decision reveals something very specific about who they are psychologically. Now, most people assume that opting out means you don't care what people think, but that's not always the truth. There are people who don't post because they're completely free from external validation, and there are people who don't post because the fear of judgment is so strong that silence feels safer than exposure. Same empty feed, completely different psychology. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself which one you are? I've noticed something in the comments, people celebrating being off social media, writing things like, deleted it all at 18, 30 now, never going back. But those people aren't the same as the person who quietly never started. One made a decision, the other never had the courage to make any decision at all. And both of them look identical from the outside. If we're going to understand this, we have to look at the full picture, not just the flattering version of it. And that full picture starts with 3 distinct profiles. The first one is the most obvious, but it's also the one that reveals what real psychological security actually looks like in practice. And most of us, even those who consider themselves self-aware, don't fully have it.
The first type of person who never posts has figured out something that takes most people decades to learn. They don't need external confirmation that their life is real. They go on vacation, post 0 photos, and the trip still has meaning. They achieve something massive, tell 2 people, and that's enough. They can sit with a good moment without the toxic urge to convert it into content. That is not normal anymore. In our current environment, that level of internal validation is genuinely rare. Psychologists call this secure self-esteem. It's different from regular confidence, which can still be fragile and need constant feeding. Secure self-esteem doesn't need feeding. It's built on something internal that doesn't fluctuate based on how a post performs on a Tuesday afternoon. Research on self-determination theory shows that human beings have 3 core psychological needs: competence, connection, and autonomy. Most social media users try to meet those needs through posting. They post to feel capable, to feel connected, to feel in control. But the first profile, they meet those needs without the platform. Their competence comes from actual work. Their connection comes from actual relationships. Their autonomy comes from a simple decision. Their life doesn't require an audience to be valid. They aren't cold or disconnected. In fact, they tend to be the most present people in the room, because they aren't halfway somewhere else, mentally composing a caption about what's happening. They are just there, fully there. Do you know someone like this in your life? Someone who seems unbothered in a way that doesn't feel like a performance? There's a specific quality to that kind of calm. It's not detachment or arrogance. It's just a stable internal world. It looks like the ultimate goal. But let's be honest, this is where we have to stop playing safe. Most of you who believe you belong to this first profile don't. You're actually in the second one, and it's the profile absolutely nobody wants to admit. Profile 2. Social media anxiety and fear of judgment. Not everyone who doesn't post is psychologically free. Some of them are paralyzed. But silence looks identical from the outside, regardless of what's causing it. The person who is completely secure and the person who is terrified of public judgment both have empty profiles. People describe them both the same way: private, quiet, not really into social media. But inside, the experience is completely different. The second profile is the person who actually wants to share. They have moments they want to document, things they're proud of, but they don't, because somewhere in the process a thought stops them. What if nobody responds? What if people judge my life? What if being seen exposes something I'm not ready to face? This is digital social anxiety, and it is more common than you think. The American Psychological Association confirmed that anxiety around online performance has increased significantly, especially in adults under 35. The generation that grew up with social media is now the most terrified of it. And here's what makes this profile so hard to recognize in yourself. The behavior feels like a preference. You tell yourself you just prefer privacy or that you don't care about clout. But be honest, really honest. Have you ever held back from posting simply because the risk of being ignored felt too heavy to carry? I'm not saying this to expose you. I'm saying it because you can only close a gap you are willing to look at. Otherwise, your silence isn't strength. It's just a very convincing version of avoidance. I'm not suggesting you should start posting, but if you are going to be quiet online, it should be because you genuinely don't need it, not because you are afraid of what happens if you try. One is power, the other is a cage that looks like a choice. But while some are trapped by fear, others are playing a completely different game. It's the profile growing fastest right now. It has nothing to do with anxiety and nothing to do with extreme inner security. It's a cold, practical calculation, and it might be the most rational response to the modern world.
Profile 3 has nothing to do with privacy or fear. It has to do with a resource we waste every single day: cognitive bandwidth. That's just a technical term for the amount of mental energy your brain has to think, create, and focus. The people in this profile made a very specific calculation. They looked at what social media was costing them, not emotionally, but practically, in hours, in attention, in creative output. They decided the return wasn't worth the investment. They aren't running from something, they are running towards something. And that changes everything. The human brain has a finite amount of focused attention per day. Research shows that after a single interruption, it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully return to a task. 23 minutes for one single check of your phone. Social media isn't one interruption, it's dozens of them stacked on top of each other every day. It quietly drains the reserves you need for things that actually matter to you. The people in this profile figured that out. They noticed that their best ideas and clearest thinking happened when they were off the platforms. They realized the platform is incredibly expensive, and the cost is invisible until you stop paying it. There's a psychological concept called the incubation effect. Creative insights don't happen during active stimulation, they happen in the quiet moments after the stimulation stops, when your brain is allowed to process without constant new input. That is why so many people report becoming highly creative after deleting social media. The app was simply occupying the space where their creativity was supposed to live. I remember a comment from someone who went through this. They said the first 2 weeks felt like actual withdrawal, genuinely uncomfortable, reaching for the phone and finding nothing there. But around week 3, something shifted. They started finishing projects that had been sitting in drafts for years. The silence wasn't empty, it was productive. These people aren't antisocial. They use information platforms, but they consume intentionally. They don't scroll compulsively. They didn't quit social media because they hate people. They quit because they decided their attention was worth more than the platforms were paying for it. And that decision turns out to have consequences that go way beyond productivity. Because what the research shows about stepping back is something the tech giants have spent billions trying to keep quiet. And the data is worse than you think.
What quitting social media does to your mental health. There's a study most people ignore because the results are highly inconvenient. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania split college students into 2 groups. One group used social media as normal. The other limited their use to just 10 minutes per day across all platforms. 10 minutes. That's it. 3 weeks later, the results were clear. The group that reduced their usage reported significantly lower levels of loneliness and depression. And these were just regular students living regular lives. But here is the detail that didn't make the headlines. They also looked at passive consumption, scrolling without posting, and they found that passive scrolling was consistently linked to lower well-being, higher comparison, and envy. Which means if you never post but still scroll, you are not protected. The damage isn't just in the performance, it's in the comparison. It's the constant low-level awareness that someone else's curated life is being compared to yours. We have a natural drive to evaluate ourselves by comparing ourselves to others, but we transition to this from small tribes. Social media turbocharged this impulse. Suddenly, you're comparing yourself to thousands of people simultaneously, all of whom are presenting only their absolute best moments. Our brains were never designed to handle this scale of competition. This isn't just academic anymore. The Surgeon General formally identified social media as a key driver of the youth mental health crisis. That is the highest medical authority in the country putting it in writing. Yet the platforms remain optimized to keep you scrolling as long as possible, regardless of what that does to your mind. The quiet people understood this intuitively. They felt something was off, and they actually listened to that feeling instead of scrolling past it. But knowing the research is the easy part. The real question is what happens to your actual relationships when you go quiet online, because that part is brutal, and it is the exact moment where most people break and run back to the screen. The real social cost of deleting social media. Let's be direct. When you stop posting, people stop reaching out. That's not a theory. It happens almost every single time. The first time you experience it, it feels like rejection. It feels like proof that without the platform, you are invisible. But you're misreading the situation. Social media created a system where staying in someone's life requires zero effort. You don't have to call, you don't have to remember anything. You just exist on the feed, and the algorithm maintains the illusion of connection. But when you leave that system, the illusion collapses, and what's left is the real thing, which is smaller, quieter,
and usually exactly the right size. I remember reading a comment from someone who went through this. When I deleted everything, I found out very quickly who actually cared. The number was much smaller, but the quality was higher than anything I'd ever experienced. That is not a loss, that is a filter. When your presence depends on a platform, your relationships become platform-dependent. They exist only inside that specific context. When you leave, the relationship either adapts or reveals itself for what it always was: convenience, not connection. Truly quiet people never had platform-dependent relationships. Their connections were built through direct contact and shared experiences, not notifications. They might have 3 friends instead of 300, but those 3 friends actually know them. They understand that the quality of connection matters infinitely more than the quantity. But let's get personal here, because this part of the conversation is where it gets uncomfortable. Are you ready to look at what your own silence is hiding?
Stop seeking external validation, the mirror test. This is the part where we stop analyzing other people and start talking about you. Because up to this point, it's been safe. We've looked at data, profiles, and research, but safety is not why you are here. So I have one direct question for you, and I want you to answer it honestly, only to yourself, right now. Which profile are you? Not the one you want to be. Which one are you actually, today, based on your real behavior? Most people who claim to be in the first profile, the secure, indifferent ones, are lying to themselves. They are actually in the second one. They're frozen by fear, but they call it privacy. But if you pretend you are free when you are actually paralyzed, you will never change. Think about the last draft you deleted. Did you stop because you genuinely didn't care? Or was there a split second where you feared how it would land? That tiny moment of calculation is the most honest data point you have, and most of us scroll right past it. The goal here isn't to force yourself to stop posting. The goal is genuine indifference, where posting or not posting carries zero emotional weight. You don't do it for validation, and you don't avoid it out of fear. An image is what you show the world, and identity is what remains when the screen is dark. The quietest people have prioritized identity, and if you want that same stability, you have to stop managing your image. But how do you actually do that? Because another 30-day digital detox is not going to save you. You need a complete internal rewiring. And the method is far less glamorous than what you've been told. How to stop social media addiction without a detox. I'm not going to tell you to delete your apps for 30 days. That advice is lazy and it doesn't work long term. If a detox actually solved this, you would have done it, felt better, and moved on. But the gap is still there. The platform is not the problem. The platform is just where the fracture becomes visible. The real issue is the space between who you are and your hunger for approval. You can throw your phone in a lake tonight, and you'll still wake up tomorrow with that same empty space. So what actually works? The shift happens when you stop trying to want less from social media and start building something that makes it genuinely irrelevant. It's about substitution at the level of psychological need. Do you need to feel capable? Then build something real in the physical world, a project, a craft, a practice, something you can evaluate on your own terms without waiting for an audience to clap. Do you need connection? Invest in fewer relationships with more depth. One deep conversation where you are actually known is worth more than 50 interactions on a feed. Do you need identity? This is where most people fail. You have to learn to sit alone in a room without immediately filling the quiet with content. Make choices based on your values, not on how they will look on a feed. Learn to trust your own judgment. None of this is fast. There is no hack here. This requires clarity. Can you describe what you are trying to build with your life in 2 simple sentences? If you can't, the algorithm will always write that story for you. And that brings us to the final, unavoidable truth. Because when this screen goes black, you will have a choice to make. And the exact nature of that choice is what separates the performers from the people who are truly alive.
Personal growth beyond social media. Because the quietest people in the room are not missing out on life, they are simply experiencing it without the distorting lens of validation. They have realized something fundamental.
A moment of pure joy does not need a digital receipt to be valid. The moment you reclaim your attention, everything shifts. You realize how much mental energy you are wasting on keeping up appearances. You stop packaging your life for sale. You just live it. This is why we're seeing a massive shift right now in 2026. More and more people are going completely dark. They're switching to basic dumb phones, or they're deliberately keeping their accounts completely empty. It is not a trend, it is a survival mechanism. And honestly, it is the only way to protect your mind, to guard it from a system designed to keep you constantly anxious and hungry for more. Let me ask you, if you look at the last thing you wanted to post, did you want to share it because you loved it or because you wanted someone else to know you loved it? That distinction is where your freedom begins. If you have found peace in the silence, or if you are still trying to protect your mind from the digital noise, write a comment below sharing your own milestone. Let's make this space a reminder that a life lived fully does not need an audience. But if you want to understand how this quiet strength changes your relationships and why disappearing is actually the ultimate filter for finding real connections, you need to understand the dark psychology of how people react when they can no longer access you. We decode exactly how that works in our video about the silent boundaries of high-value minds, which is on your screen right now. Keep protecting your attention, and we will keep decoding the mind together.